Welcome to Talk a Good Game, a show all about, you guessed it, good games. I'm your host, Andrew Wolf, and joining me today on this inaugural episode are the other two pieces of the Deku Deals Triforce, Michael Fairley.
Hey, that's me.
And Scott Parker.
Hello, planet Earth.
Guys, I'm so glad we're getting together and recording this. Super pumped to talk about some good games. But first, what are we working on? What have we been working on so far this year, and what do we got coming up?
Yeah, I'm heads down right now on adding Steam to Deku Deals. We've had some Steam support in beta for the past month or two, and I'm putting the polishing touches on what people would expect from a Steam experience, like supporting bundles from Humble and Fanatical, as well as making sure that like trailer videos and screenshots and everything like that are coming in properly.
Which is great. And it's huge. I think it's huge for the site and for all the users, but it's especially a big deal for Scott, who mostly plays on Steam. Is that right?
That is true. Yes. I still own my PS4 as long as there's not an Everybody's Golf 2 sequel that comes out on some other platform. I'll continue to own it. But yeah, Steam is my bread and butter. So I'm super excited about this. And it's been a really fun journey to go on for sure.
Michael, when you founded Deku Deals in late 2017, I should know that. I think it's late 2017 when you...
Yeah, the very first lines of code were written in December 2017, and then the site launched in March of 2018, about 3 months later.
So did you ever imagine that you'd be adding Steam? Was that like the plan all along, or did you think it was just going to be Switch?
No, I mean, there's other sites that do great jobs tracking Steam and PC deals, and I've been a user of those for a long time, and they were in some ways the inspiration for Deku Deals. But sort of as Deku has expanded into Xbox and PlayStation, we've become multi-platform. I've really wanted a place to track sort of like my game collection across all of my platforms, as well as my wish list across all of my platforms, and sort of the only way to make that a reality is for Deku to add PC as well. So that's part of why we're here.
Yeah. Super pumped. I'm also pumped to talk about, obviously, these good games. And I want to start with our favorite games of all time. And I've got these show notes here, and we answered these questions ahead of recording. And I was sort of chuckling to myself because on our About page, we have, each of us have listed a desert island game, which in my mind I think is very different than favorite game of all time. It seems like it would be the same, but like for me, a desert island game is a game that I could play while I'm stuck on a desert island, like just play over and over and over again, or for hours and hours and hours. And I don't think that my favorite game of all time is necessarily the same thing. To me, I think favorite game of all time also factors in nostalgia is like a huge part of it. But Michael, both your desert island game on our About page and what you've got listed as your favorite game of all time are the same. I'd love to hear why Outer Wilds is the same for both of those.
I don't know if Outer Wilds would be my desert island game,
or is it because I stole Breath of the Wild?
Maybe, I don't know. We wrote that About page stuff in a hurry a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
probably need some editing at this point. Yeah, do you want me to just dive into talking about Outer Wilds?
Yeah. Do you want to start with, like, what is Outer Wilds? Outer Wilds feels like I've played a little bit of it. It feels like a game that is difficult to explain without giving away too much, or like why it's so amazing. But I'd love to hear your take on it.
Kind of, I'll give like a very light spoilers that are like, right, if you watch the trailer for the game on the Steam page, this is the extent of what's spoiled, but it's still minor spoilers. The game is sort of a time loop where you're flying around this like tiny solar system that has a couple planets in it, but every 22 minutes the sun explodes and sort of resets you back to the beginning of where you were and first woke up and are getting on your ship. And so you're trying to sort of like solve this mystery of, well, why is the sun exploding, that's sort of a heck of a mystery to be presented with. And there's just like a lot of open-ended exploration and puzzle solving. And it's unlike a lot of other things. And something about it just like really hooks into me and sort of like meant a lot and was fun. And it ticks a lot of boxes of things that I like in games. So one thing that I find myself liking, in all sorts of games across different genres, is this idea of open-ended exploration of the game. Gives you some sort of high-level goal of like Breath of the Wild did a great job of this. Of, after you finish the tutorial, it's like, okay, here's the final goal. Defeat Ganon or Ganondorf. I forget which one it is in that game. But you're not going to accomplish that goal for another like 50 or 100 hours. But it says like, here's what you're trying to do. Go figure out how you want to do that. Explore the world, build your own quest. We're not going to cover your screen and like arrows of guiding exactly where you should be walking, but it's just like go figure out how to accomplish your big goal. And Outer Wilds does the same thing. If there's lots of as you're exploring, there's lots of things you're drawn to, but the game never pushes you towards them. And that's just like an aspect in a lot of games that I constantly find myself drawn to. Some other things it does really well that are sort of things I like across lots of games is that it's a small or medium-sized open world. I find open worlds really cool in that there's like it ties into this exploration of you can explore and dig into nooks and crannies and find interesting stuff. But sort of unlike the traditional open worlds of Breath of the Wild or Skyrim or GTA, once something gets small enough to where every corner of it was handcrafted, it's a lot more interesting. And it is, you can explore every nook and cranny in the world. Unlike Breath of the Wild, you're never going to see, every inch and every cave and every little thing unless you are really, really dedicating your time to it.
Or like No Man's Sky, which is procedurally generated worlds that are like sometimes feel cool, but other times feel not as cool. I think being handcrafted is different. Yeah.
Yeah. And you start to feel the repetition in it. But Outer Wilds, you never feel repetition because you do for different reasons. But while exploring, it's every nook and cranny of the world was placed there by hand in a way that I just really appreciate. And so it's got those two things going for it. But really, it's like it's a big puzzle game, but it's not like let's slide little blocks around on a grid to solve the puzzles. It's there's a mystery, and you need to piece it together. And just something about all of those aspects. You put them together and it's the game for me.
And not to be confused with the Outer Worlds, which I think released at like in the same year at the same time or something. And
in the same world, similar spacey vibes. Yeah. Unfortunate name collision.
And how long is Outer Wilds? Like, I assume you can like take different amount of time depending on how many loops you go through, or is that like too spoilery to go into?
I guess there's like two answers to that question. One is that I guess the average play length is like pretty similar. I think it's probably like 20-ish hours, maybe 15, maybe 25, but you're going to put a dozen or 2 dozen hours into it to sort of like fully play the thing. One thing that's kind of fascinating about it is that it's part of this genre called Brainvanias or Metroidvanias. People have been, playing around with the name where it's...
I love that.
Getting around the world is sort of like a Metroidvania in that you sort of like unlock new places to go, but the way you unlock it is through learning knowledge as a player rather than acquiring some sort of in-game item or key or whatever. But so because that knowledge is entirely in your head as a player, you could sit down after you've beat the game, you could sit down at a fresh install of it and beat it in 20 minutes or something because you know exactly where to go and what to do. So the game could be as short as 20 minutes, but there's no way a first time player is going to spend that little time with it.
And what's the, I know on the Switch, there's the Archaeologist edition. Is that just the Switch edition or is there DLC or something?
There's a DLC and the DLC is like at least as good as the base game.
That's right.
It's like
Echoes of the Eye.
Echoes of the Eye. Yeah. It's more of the same, but it's, the classic thing where they learned how to do more of the same better after having done it once and gotten a second shot at it. So Echoes of the Eye is also fantastic.
Yeah. I think my extent of my experience with the game is, like waking up on the planet, talking to some people, taking off in my little spaceship. I think I got sucked into like a black hole or something. And then I woke up on my planet again and started all over again.
Yep.
So not only like after the 22 minutes or whatever you restart, but also like if you die, you restart.
Yeah.
So I think like
there's a number of things that can restart you.
Yeah.
And yeah, often deaths are, accidentally flying into the sun or falling and crashing, or, running out of forgetting to put on your helmet before you get out of the spaceship in an oxygen poor environment will do you in. So there's a little bit of hostile environment going on, but one of the things I also really like about the game is that it's not combat heavy. There's like some very light, fauna that will harm you, but it's mostly, happy exploration vibes where you, if you're dying, it's usually because you did something foolish and not because, a creature came to get you.
So there's more puzzles and less fighting than like Tomb Raider or Uncharted or something.
Oh, yeah. More puzzles, less fighting than, anything like that.
No cover fighting against mercenaries or anything like that. So.
Yeah, it's definitely not a game for everyone. I know both of you have started it and bounced off of it pretty quickly, and it's you have to be in the mood for all of these different things I've talked about, as well as it's a little repetitive because it is a time loop, and I enjoy that sort of repetition, but not everyone does.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I bounce off a game because I don't like it, and I think in this case I bounced off it because I just wasn't in the right mood, and it's definitely still on my list of games that I want to play. But Scott, did you bounce off this because you didn't like it, or were you like me and you just weren't in the right mood?
Oh, it's in a category of game where it's like, I admire it. I recognize it as a good thing. It is just not for me. And I think it does come down to the repetition that Michael's talking about. There's other media, fiction, tabletop role playing where I think time loops are enormously fun. But I think in both of those formats, the participants, the authors, have the ability to like fast forward to the good stuff. Whereas I felt like in Outer Wilds, I would land at an unnamed location and I would forget that helmet and be like, okay, well, I got to make my way back here again. I got to do all these steps again. I got to do all this stuff again. And a recurring theme for me as a gamer is perhaps a little too impatient sometimes. And that was enough for me. If I had unlimited time, I'd definitely come back to it and deal with that.
Which is funny because your favorite game of all time, you've got listed here as Slay the Spire, which I know is not a time loop, but for me is maybe in a similar space of like, if you lose, you have to start over again. But I think it's different enough that it's still good for you, obviously.
It is, yeah. So for the uninitiated, Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck builder. You'll choose one of a few archetypes. You'll generally start the game with the same set of cards, but you'll progress through a series of encounters, of combat encounters with this deck of cards, customizing it over the course of the run. With the hopes of building a powerful enough deck to kind of get through the final bosses of each of 3 different acts. And so I think, yes, it is very repetitive. Like, you're always going to face, in Act 1, you're going to face the same set of encounters. Generally, you won't necessarily know which one's going to be first, but like your first 3, you have a pretty good sense of what those are going to be. Likewise, when you fight the first boss, there's 1 of 3 different bosses. You know what that's going to be. And so it is repetitive in that way. But I tend to subscribe to, I think it was Sid Meier had a quote of describing games as a series of interesting decisions. And I think for me, that's the big difference here is I feel like with Slay the Spire, right away, I'm making interesting decisions. I'm having to figure out, like, there are certain cards that are great at the end of a run, but you really don't want them in your deck early on. And so when I'm presented with one of those with my early card rewards after a combat encounter, I'm immediately having to agonize over this. And I've just been playing the game for 30 seconds, a minute after that first encounter to really get to that point. And so I think for me, that's kind of the difference and helps that repetition be exciting is I feel like even in those early stages of a Slay the Spire run, there's still decision spaces that I haven't encountered before as a player.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning of that, you said that it's a deck building roguelike. I think an argument can be made that it is the deck building roguelike, right? Like, I feel like it's the one that maybe it's not the first. I doubt it was the first, but it really feels like it was the one that the game that set everyone up and like people really got into deck building roguelikes and wanted to make more deck building roguelikes. Do you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah. I would say like I really only became a student of this genre of the roguelike deck builder subgenre in the wake of Slay the Spire. So there probably are some predecessors that I'm not as familiar with. I've played roguelikes, all the way back to installing NetHack way back on my 46 personal computer back in the day. And so I think that part of it I'm relatively familiar with. But you're probably right, but I'm sure somebody out there is going to cite some Steam game I've never heard of that has a dozen reviews.
Yeah. So you're a big board game fan too. And do you feel like that, I don't know, has sort of helped make this your favorite game of all time, or does this just stand alone without the board game experience?
I think that's an interesting question. I think in some ways it does stand alone, especially because there is now a Slay the Spire board game adaptation that you can go track down and buy. And honestly, I'll say I don't like it as much as the base game. And I think in part it's because Slay the Spire presents itself as a very familiar set of cards, but I think it was the first one of the first games I encountered that took that and really started to do a lot of interesting things that would be harder to do in a physical board game. The idea of upgrading a card in your deck, the idea of things that can modify the effects of cards as you play them. That you've certainly seen games since then. Marvel Snap comes to mind in particular, of doing really interesting things that you couldn't do in a physical board game. But I think it was how Slay the Spire nods towards that without having a real being limited by what you could do with a board game. And I think that compares differently to other games that are board game inspired, like Armello is very much inspired by Talisman and kind of adventure board games. And I think that one you very easily could replicate, or would have more easily replicate as a board game than Slay the Spire could.
And you have to excuse me, my ignorance here, because I've played a few rounds of Slay the Spire, but not a ton. I think I've played about as much Slay the Spire as I have Outer Wilds. But I think one thing that I like about some roguelikes I've played, in particular, Hades comes to mind, where when you die, like you do often in a lot of roguelikes, you start from the beginning, but you have powers that you take over to the next run. And I enjoyed Hades in that way because it felt like I'm not very good at video games, and this is a hard game, and I'm going to die often. But each time I die, I'm a little bit stronger. My character's a little bit stronger, regardless of whether or not I'm better at the game. Is there any of that in Slay the Spire, or is it just totally fresh slate every time you start?
I would say not exactly. As you play more Slay the Spire, there are things you can unlock. New cards, new character archetypes, basically new starting decks and new card pools. But there's not a power progression in the way that with Hades, it's been a long time since I played Hades, so forgive me, but I think you can increase your starting health, and you can increase some of these other things, or Dead Cells, which I've played a lot more of. You can increase the number of healing potions you start with in the game and have access to in the game, and that doesn't really exist for Slay the Spire, which for me I think is oftentimes a feature rather than a bug, because it feels less grindy for me than some of those other games. But it also has the downside of the game gives you more options and becomes maybe a little more complicated in some ways, but never really gets easier. Your ability to play it grows, and so it becomes easier. But if your first encounter with it is man, this is hard, and I lost after 4 encounters, that may not substantially change for you in later runs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I imagine, I don't know, Michael, how many times you've played through Outer Wilds, but I imagine Scott has put in many, many, many more hours into Slay the Spire just because of the kind of game it is. Scott, do you know how many? Well, Michael, how many hours have you played Have you played Outer Wilds more than once? Does it have replayability at all?
I've played through it once. I intend to, replay it sometime in the next few years after a little bit of my memories have faded of it. But it's sort of like a book or a movie of once you've played it, the whole thing, and playing it again will be sort of reliving some of that initial experience, but never have the same wild discoveries because you already know all of the interesting plot twists.
Yeah. And I was thinking that because Scott, we were talking about upgrades that carry over to another playthrough. And I feel like, with Rogue Legacy or Hades, like we were saying, I feel like that could potentially impact the amount of time you could dump into, say, the Spire, considering you've probably played hundreds or maybe more games. I feel like if you had played hundreds or thousands of games of Slay the Spire, and it had, a feature that you carried over progress, like you would have maybe completed or 100%ed it in the sometime in the past, and maybe it wouldn't be your favorite game. Do you feel like that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. So yeah, I just checked Steam while we were talking. Steam tells me I've played 395.1 hours of Slay the Spire, which is bonkers because one of the reasons I go to Slay the Spire as often as I do is I think, I've only got 15 minutes. I can't really jump into this heavy narrative, yada, yada game. I'll just play a little bit of Slay the Spire. And, an hour later, I'm finishing my run and be like, okay, well, where did that time go? So yeah, I feel like because there's that lack of kind of permanent progression of advancement of those abilities, I think that does help the game retain some longevity. It does become more of a desert island kind of game. Is like, there's other games where I've perhaps had more of that, amazing gaming experience than that. But for me, when I think of favorite, I think of what can I always come back to? What am I always in the mood to play? And for me, Slay the Spire is on a very short list of I'm always happy to revisit it because it's not so much that my character in the game gets better, but I'm always going to stumble into some space of the game that I haven't encountered before. I'll find some situation where I'm like, oh, you know what? Wild Strike is kind of a good card for me in this situation. I thought it was bad before. That's a bad example. Wild Strike is often solid, but there's always that kind of new depth for me to find. I think it helps that I'm honestly just an okay Slay the Spire player, that I'm not great at it, but I think that the feature you're talking about, there's a person, Jorbs, who has done a lot of streaming and kind of teaches strategy guides on how to play Slay the Spire. And when he's playing at the highest difficulty level, Ascension 20, even then, like a win on a run is not guaranteed. And this person knows the game stone cold. They are very, very good at it. And so to see somebody at that level still, finding interesting decisions to make, I think speaks to the depth.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I can't imagine streaming it for hundreds of hours or however many hours that person's streamed the game for. But so this Spire, I feel like that's one that I want to get back to. I feel like I might like it a little bit more it's on iPad or like iOS and Android, right? Have you played it on mobile?
I haven't. I've played it on Steam Deck, and I will say, like, it's great with a controller. It's really lends itself well to that. I'm surprised I haven't bought it for my iPad. I think that's mostly just like it's really hard for me to buy the same game twice. But that speaks more to my cheapskateness as opposed to anything about the game.
Yeah, it's good that you work at a deal, work on a deal site. So yeah, I was expecting when you brought up the number of hours you've played on Steam, I was expecting you to be like, well, I put 300 plus hours on Steam, but I've put another 300 hours on my iPad. So maybe it's a good thing. I have heard a bunch of people talk about like they bought Balatro. I think it's Balatro. And then there's like, I shouldn't have bought it for my phone, or I shouldn't have bought it like at all because I put too many hours into it. So maybe it's a good thing you don't have it on your iPad. No,
I think that is definitely true. Yeah, I for my phone in particular, I am very deliberate about not having very many. Like, I have some very okay games on my phone when I am desperately bored and I've run out of things to read on my RSS reader. But yeah, good games don't belong on a phone because I have no self-control.
Well, I think my favorite game that I've got listed here is 20-ish years older than both of these games. I actually don't know when Slay the Spire released. Was it 2015? I want to say 2015 or something like that.
I think I think it came out of early access officially and fully released in 2017.
So not quite 20 years, but Deus Ex, the original Deus Ex. And I think, like I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation, I think that for me, this is my favorite game of all time. Probably mostly due to just like I played it a bunch as a kid and played it over and over and over again. That was back when I didn't have money to buy a bunch of games. I think I always had Counter-Strike. I think later I had played World of Warcraft. But when you've got 5 games total, like you play the crap out of them. And Deus Ex was definitely one that I played the crap out of.
And Andrew, what is Deus Ex?
Deus Ex is I don't know if it's cyberpunk. I wanted to look up the Wikipedia description for it because it has been a long time since I played it. Cyberpunk, it's like an action role-playing game. Playing it as a kid, I'm not sure that I really understood the story as much as I would understand it now. But essentially, you're like a government super cop that you go on this story to solve a mystery about people getting sick, and it turns out that it's it's a 25-year-old game, so it turns out it's the government, and there's some like Illuminati and some other things there, but it's cool. It's by Warren Spector, who also did a bunch of other games that I can't think of the titles. Let's see. Ultima, Wing Commander, a lot of Ultima, System Shock, Wing Commander, and Deus Ex, and Epic Mickey, and Thief. I think it's like a lot of in the shadows, a lot of stealth, but also, as a kid, I wasn't doing as much stealth and mostly just guns blazing. So as an RPG, you can like upgrade your, I would do runs through the game where like I would only use a pistol, and I would upgrade my pistol all the way, and I could essentially like use it as a sniper rifle. And it's just like a little silenced pistol, but I could snipe people from like a mile away. And I just have a lot of nostalgia for it. And I think it's never been remade. It's never been remastered or re-released. You can still pick it up on GOG and Steam, I'm sure, for super cheap. I think it's like 99 cents or something. But I think it's still worth picking up. That's I haven't played it in a number of years, but I think it would probably still be worth playing. Now, I think that both of you have played the later games, Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. I did play Deus Ex Invisible War, and that came out in 2003, which was 3 years after the first game. I remember being super excited for that game to release. The game released, and I think at the time I had a Pentium 4. I don't even remember what video card I had, and maybe it was just like the onboard video card. But I remember my grandma had to take me down to Office Depot to buy an NVIDIA 6800 GS or GT or something, because I bought the game on release and tried to play it, and like my video card was not good enough to play it at all. So I remember buying the 6800 with like every penny that I had to my name. I think that was also part of it. Like, I spent a bunch of money on it basically and had to replay it over and over again. But I don't know. I wasn't able to really get into Human Revolution or Mankind Divided. I think both of you have played those.
That's correct.
And did you play the original? And how do they compare?
Yeah. So, like you, I loved the original Deus Ex. I played through it multiple times, rarely varying up my play style, candidly. I was mostly just like to figure out like which parts of the game did I not explore? Where what things did I miss? And so I would say, when I think about what that original experience felt like, I think about Human Revolution in particular. I think that was a very faithful sequel to that. I think it captured a lot of those same aspects. Yeah, the game had flaws, and everybody hated the boss battles and some things I think were not very authentic. But I think that captured a lot of that same core experience. Like you, I would struggle to articulate the plot of the original Deus Ex, and I would really struggle to tell you what happened in Human Revolution in a coherent way. Artificial limbs are important, but and then Mankind Divided, I think, has some outstanding moments as a game, as a series of interesting decisions to make. I think there are some parts where it really shines, but I will say, like, for me, that one wasn't quite as successful. I think Michael may have some different opinions though.
Yeah, so I think both of the. So I'm ignoring Invisible War because it was garbage. It was not very good.
This is a talking shit game, so I don't have much to say about Invisible War.
Yeah, Mankind Divided and Human Revolution did probably like as good of a job making Deus Ex sequels in the 2010s as you coulda. Just like Deus Ex and some of the other games from around the time of System Shock and System Shock 2 and so on have been like hugely influential on action and RPG games in the 20 years since then. And so a lot of what made Deus Ex special has sort of like bled into the DNA of a lot of gaming. And so to just put out another Deus Ex, in the 2010s, is probably 15-ish, it just sort of like landed a little differently. So they did a good job making the sequels. none of the original team was really involved. I enjoyed playing them, but they're not special in the way the original was special when it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, Scott, you touched on it, the like multiple choice, like you can make your way through the game in multiple ways. Like literally, instead of, you can just blast your way through the front door, or you can, like if you level up your lock picking, you can like unlock a door like on the other side of the map and like make your way through some tunnels and get in some way. I do remember Gunther. You can, like, there's a point where he's still friendly to you and like you can kill him, like shoot him with like a rocket launcher or something, and then later he's supposed to arrest you and he's dead and he just like can't arrest you. And I didn't realize that until, I don't know, I'd probably played through it a dozen times, and then I realized you could do that because he's really, really difficult to kill. But if you have the rocket launcher, you can like take him out, and it changes the story, not in a way that I think modern games are able to change the story really, but it does, like, it's a different cutscene, or like something different happens. And you're right. I think, Michael, I think you really, hit the nail on the head there with the, like it really is in the DNA of a ton of games after that. And I think a game that I'm ready to jump back into, I played it at launch, and I think anybody that played this at launch, felt the same way. Like Cyberpunk 2077, I think maybe not a spiritual successor, but I think now that it's been improved to the point that it is now, it feels like it could be a good Deus Ex type sequel. Like I think there's so many different ways to do the missions, whereas Deus Ex was a single mission that you got to make your way through a level. Like Cyberpunk is totally open world and different in that way, but I think that the cyberpunky role playing video game that is Cyberpunk 2077, I think might scratch that itch for me. But I also recently picked up a bunch of Xbox 360 games, and I'm curious to try Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. So maybe I'll jump in those next before I jump into Cyberpunk.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the original, they're definitely worth playing.
I think when I played them,
and like Scott said, they have some like amazing moments scattered throughout, even if the whole thing does not completely land for you.
Yeah, and I think when I initially tried to play them, my computer was not powerful enough to run them at more than like 20 frames, so it was not an enjoyable experience. And I think in order to have an enjoyable experience, I need to play it on something that can give me a solid frame rate. But that's enough of old games. I would love to talk about some games that we are playing right now that we love and we feel are underrated. I'll start since I'm already jabbering. This one is a game that I think I've seen a lot of hate online for, or a lot of like people that are maybe disappointed in it, and I'm a little bit confused by that. And I was talking to someone in our Discord about it as well. Avowed. Avowed came out a couple weeks ago. It's a lot like Skyrim, but prettier, newer, super interesting. Like the world is very vibrant and has like super high contrast. And I think people complain about that, but I think that's part of the world. It is supposed to be vibrant and colorful and weird. And the character you play is what's called a godless in the game. And the game exists in the, what universe is that? The Planescape is the wrong name, but now I've got to look it up.
Forgotten Realms?
Is it Forgotten Realms? Obsidian developed it. I guess I should have known. Oh, Pillars of Eternity universe. That's what it is.
Okay, definitely not Forgotten Realms.
Yeah. But I don't know. They're all pretty similar. I think if you're really into lore, like maybe it being a part of the Pillars of Eternity world or universe matters. It didn't really matter much to me. I don't think I played that much of Pillars of Eternity. But I'm really enjoying it. I think it's on Game Pass. I've been playing it on my Xbox Series X, so not spending any money on it has also helped my enjoyment level. But I think it's been a lot of fun. It's like I wanted a fantasy role playing game where I make some decisions that maybe impact how people feel about me, or you can have a gun, like an oldie time gun, powder gun, and then so my character has a gun in one hand and a wand in the other, so I'm like casting spells and shooting bears, and it's just it's a great, just doesn't take itself too seriously. I've got a couple problems with it, mostly like the cities feel pretty dead. There's not like, I don't know, in the year of 2025, I expect, like Witcher 3 came out, I don't even, like a long time ago, and its cities felt very alive. Like people have things that they do throughout the day. People are walking around doing different things. And even if they don't actually matter, it helped make the cities feel alive. And Avowed doesn't have that. Luckily, like I'm not in the city very often, so it hasn't really impacted my playthrough. Another complaint I saw was like, you can't like kill anyone. Like I think in Skyrim or a lot of other games that go for quote unquote realism, where like you could kind of kill anyone you want and deal with the consequences later. Like you can't just kill anyone, which I think at first I was bothered by, but I guess I don't really care, is what I've sort of settled on. Yeah. So I think I've overall enjoyed it. It's like I said, it doesn't take itself too seriously. You know, you can upgrade a bunch of skills, and I'm upgrading my, my spells and casting cool spells and freezing people. And yeah, it's a cool world to bounce through.
Would you recommend it to someone? You mentioned The Witcher earlier, and then Witcher is another one of those games where I played it and was like, this is clearly amazing. This is clearly great. It's not for me. Do you think, would you recommend I dip into Avowed?
Yeah, I think especially if you have Game Pass, I think I felt similarly about Witcher, and I still feel like I need to go back and play it. And maybe it's an Outer Wilds for me, where it's like, I know it's amazing. I really want to love it. And, I don't know, now that I have much more experience with super long games, a bunch of JRPGs, I think maybe, I can jump back into it and maybe enjoy it a little bit more. One thing that really drove me away from, The Witcher 3 was I felt like the character was on ice skates, which is a weird description, but like the movement, when I stopped, it felt like my character kept going for a second. And the movement just didn't feel very good to me. Avowed movement feels great. I love that it's both a first person if you want it to be, but also you can make it a third person, perspective. I would say definitely 100% check it out if you have Game Pass. If you don't have Game Pass, watch a review or like watch some trailers or something and see if you're interested. And it's hard for me to answer that for you, because I know like even a $20 game is like a super hard sale for Scott Parker. But I don't know. Like I think I've put probably 6 or 7 hours into it so far, and I love that it's doesn't, like I said multiple times now, it's like it doesn't take itself too seriously, which I felt like Witcher 3 did. And I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me to like pay attention to the story, care a lot about the world, and I don't really feel like I need to do that in Avowed. I feel like I could if I wanted to. But I don't care. So the music and the voice acting is all great, and the graphics are amazing. So if you do care about that, you can. But yeah, I would say I would recommend you check it out, but it's hard for me to recommend you check out a full price game. So a little bit back and forth there, but, and I don't think you have Game Pass.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah. But no, this definitely sounds like one that I will check out when it is on a good sale. The fact that it's lighthearted is my jam, because I tend to dip into games for like an hour here, an hour there, and it doesn't sound like the kind of thing where I need to be deeply engrossed in the lore. I enjoyed Skyrim, except when I had to deal with the main plot, something dragons. I don't really remember. So this sounds very compelling to me.
Yeah, it's cool. It reminds me of a game. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It came out, I want to say it's like Might and Magic, but that is not right. Where you could like kick people into spikes on the walls, and there was like cool casting, and I don't know. Somebody will point out what the game is, but it reminds me a lot of that, where it's very lighthearted and it doesn't take itself seriously. I don't know. There is some story about you're a godless and you're trying to like figure out why people are getting changed, and I don't know. I haven't really been paying attention, but yeah, there's cool parts where it's like you got to, you're going through the woods, and there's an old abandoned house, and the door is barred from the inside, but one of your companions has an ability that he can like shoot his gun, or he can cast fire or something, and you can like bust through a wall and get inside that way if you use your companion's ability. So yeah, it's just it's a lot like Skyrim, but I don't know, less serious and gorgeous. Man, it is a very beautiful game. I've been playing it on my Series X because my gaming PC is dead, and I don't think it is on Mac. No, it's not. Just Windows and Xbox. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. I would say if you don't have Game Pass, I mean, under $20 would be a no-brainer for me, but check out some trailers and see what you think. Now, a game that the three of us have played, I loved seeing this on the list. Scott, Very, Very Valet. We had a blast. The three of us, Team Deku, had a blast playing this together. But you want to talk about what Very, Very Valet is and why you love it so much?
Yes. So the reductive description would be it's Overcooked, but you are parking cars. And to go a little bit deeper on that, so it's a primarily like a couch co-op multiplayer game, where each level there's a different variety of cars that are coming in and kind of, environmental challenges, and people drop off their cars. You have to go put them somewhere, and then eventually they're going to be done shopping or eating at a restaurant, and they're going to want their car back, and you got to drive it back to them. And that is it. I think it has definitely flown under the radar. I checked just before this conversation, and it has, I think, 71 reviews on Steam.
Wow, that's all?
That's all.
Wow.
I think this game deserved a lot more success than it got, because I think what they have done, like, there's a lot of, we were talking about, say, the Spire and the other games it inspired earlier. I think Overcooked had a similar effect of, there are so many games that would describe themselves as overcooked, but ... And I think a lot of those games, and even Overcooked itself at times, creates more and more gameplay through adding complexity and adding challenge. And I think for me, like, I totally understand why they do that. A lot of games follow that same curve. I was just talking about, say, the Spire, adding complexity over time and how much I appreciate that. But in a couch multiplayer game, for me, that leads to a pattern where, like, the first 15 levels of an Overcooked or an Overcooked 2 or the DLC, I really enjoy. And then it gets to be too much for me. And I'm like, okay, I got to be done with this game. I got to bail because it's too hard now. And with Very, Very Valet, they've very consciously gone for variety as opposed to escalation and complexity. Like, the way I describe the game, like, that's true of the first level, is true of the last level. People drop off cars, you put them somewhere, and then you bring them back. That's it.
Yeah.
But, you go from a very simple restaurant layout to, eventually you're doing it at an airport, then crossing a runway to eventually, I don't want to spoil some of the later levels, but they're great. And they're great through just hijinks and variety. It is a game where consistently, my wife and I we're now completing our third playthrough on yet a higher custom difficulty level. And we still laugh so hard at what is happening. I can't think of another game I've laughed harder at.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Overcooked, and obviously I feel like you have to bring up Overcooked when you're talking about Very, Very Valet. But I totally agree with you. I felt like Overcooked got to a point where I was stressed as if I was working in a restaurant. Like, oh no, I got to get, this person wants their burger in this order, and I'm I'm stressed like I'm in a restaurant. And I think in the time that we spent playing Very, Very Valet, and we did it online, and I believe that only you owned a copy, and Steam has like a,
I think it was a remote play together. Yes,
which is awesome. I love that. Anybody that's listening is like cheapskate, like three of us. You only have to own one copy, and then you can play with friends. I would love to play this in person next time we get together. I think it would be a ton of fun couch co-op, but it was a lot of fun, playing it online together. And I think that you're right. The difference is with variety. And I think something that they really nailed with Very, Very Valet is the difficulty all has to do with like getting the car back in time. And we played through a dozen levels, maybe less than a dozen levels, but I felt like it never felt unfair, and it always felt like getting the car back just in time, like literally at the last millisecond, felt so rewarding. And Overcooked has that rewarding feeling, but totally agree. Like after 15 levels, it doesn't feel that way anymore. And I am super surprised to see that or to hear that Very, Very Valet only has 71 reviews on Steam. That kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm shocked. Like, people always talk about in the abstract how many games release on Steam and how much of a challenge it is. I think this is just further evidence to like, yeah, it is really hard. And as far as I can tell, like, the studio never officially announced it's no longer a thing, but I don't think any of them are working together. A Very, Very Valet 2 looks very, very unlikely at this point.
Oh.
But it's still a banger. And I think the fact that people have overlooked it means it also goes on great sales periodically. I think I picked it up for $3.50, and I feel like I would have this would have been a $20 purchase for me. I like it that much.
Yeah, I was just checking the price history on DekuDeals.com. Looks like it's also available on Switch, PS5, and Steam. And $2.99 is the lowest price ever for Switch and Steam, and looks like PS5 is a little bit more than that at $4.49. But man, for $3, that's a deal. Honestly, even for full price, like 15, I wouldn't pay full price for it because I know I can get it on sale. But even $15, like I don't know, I'd pay that much for it.
Yeah, just chiming in here for a moment. As somebody who, like my spouse and I, 100%ed Overcooked and Overcooked 2, and we love those games, but they definitely, after a few levels, you sort of have to like lock in, come up with a plan, assign roles, like have a rotation strategy around the kitchen, and it like gets to be kind of a lot. And very Valet is. You can't just like be lazy or totally goof around, but you don't have to lock in quite to the same extent to like have a blast. And really what I said about like it gives you variety instead of challenge in order to stay interesting is so true. And I think this game is awesome too.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I'm thinking back to the times we play. Like you can't be totally goofy and totally screw around, but there was definitely times where I was driving like an idiot, or like I would park a car somewhere and one of you would be like, dude, WTF, like why did you park that there? And it's frustrating, but not in a way that's like totally awful. I feel like if my fiance and I played Overcooked, I don't know, I'd be a little bit worried about the wedding. We're both so competitive. I don't know, I'd be a little bit stressed about that, but very Valet is not that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's because it is so simple, even when one player makes a mistake, they park a car in a bizarre location or they flip it over or something like that. Like, okay, it's salvageable. It's not like in some games like Overcooked or some of the other imitations of that, where it's like, nope, you put mushrooms in the pot and it needs to be tomatoes. Like, start over. Like, I've never had to tell my wife, no, like this was wrong, do it again, in a way that like I have to gently say in some of the other games of this ilk. There's always a chance to recover and make it work in very Valet, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Out of all the games in all three questions that we've got for this episode, I think this one especially is one that it's like, I really want people to buy it. Like skip Avowed if you don't care. I haven't played Satisfactory, which spoilers was the one we're talking about next. And like the favorite games of all time are good. We've got some more questions coming up, but man, very Valet for $3 is like, please, if you're at all interested in it, go and buy it. With that said, Michael, I have seen you've got the what you're playing enabled on Discord, and I don't think Scott does. Otherwise, I think I would see a lot of Slay the Spire. But I've seen a ton of this show up. In addition to what's the other game you've been playing? Helldivers 2. But I think I've seen Satisfactory like a lot more, and I'd love to hear about that because I don't.
Yeah, really I've been on a Satisfactory binge for the past few weeks. I love factory games. You put a factory in a video game, I'm going to play it and love it, even if it's not good. Satisfactory is good though. It's definitely from the I would describe it as like Factorio but 3D. It's sort of like you're in a big open world hostile alien planet where you're trying to survive and get off or something, but you have to like build a factory to produce all the parts you need to do research, to produce more parts, to build more things, to produce more parts to get off the planet. And that loop and gameplay really works for me. I think it's sort of like if you like factory games, you'll like this. If you don't, you won't.
Yeah. Is it, let's see, how often does it go on sale? Never. Never is I mean, it's been on sale a couple times for $32, but, it's developed and published by Coffee Stain, which I feel like they've been on a roll with like really good games. Goat Simulator is one that comes to mind immediately. Yeah. Deep Rock Galactic. Like they publish or develop some awesome games. And I'm super interested in Satisfactory. I think in part, I just pulled up the page on Deku Deals. Oh, it is a lot different looking than what was the first game? Factorio. I think I was expecting more Factorio. So do you play Satisfactory from a first person perspective?
Yeah, it is like first person 3D.
Oh.
whereas Factorio is sort of like it's almost like a Command and Conquer style RCS
Yeah.
interface. So they're like mechanically very similar, but the user interface to those mechanics are very different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking of it from a Command and Conquer perspective, because my favorite parts of playing like Red Alert or Tiberium Sun is like building my base. And so maybe like for me, checking out Factoria first. But I don't know. I like the different take on that sort of base building, but first person perspective. And it feels like that loop would be super satisfying.
Yeah, I think Factorio is probably the better game, and if I like Factorio would be on my short list for desert island games, and I don't know if Satisfactory would do it for me.
I see that, you know, you put question mark at the end of Satisfactory as a game you love right now that you feel is underrated. Did you put that question mark there because it has almost 200,000 overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam?
Yeah, it's not really underrated. It's sort of like among people who play these sorts of games, it's very highly rated, and among people who don't, they don't care about it, because if you don't like factory games, you don't like factory games. But yeah, it's good. It's not really underrated, but it's I don't know too many people who have played much of it.
Yeah, and maybe underrated's a hard one. I think maybe like not talked about enough, and maybe because Factoria steals all the, like, I have heard of Factoria, and I've only heard of Satisfactory because I've seen your like play history on Discord. So I think maybe underrated when you're comparing it to, like you said, other factory games. Does it have oh wait, Satisfactory is already in your Steam library. What? Did I buy this?
It was bundled in like one of those really good bundles.
Okay.
Sometime in the past year, I think.
Yeah, that must have been it. Wow. I was like, hey, I'm curious about this. I would play a demo. Oh wait, I don't have to do that. I think I'll just play it. Can I play it on my Mac? That was the real question. No. Looks like it's Windows only. That's unfortunate. But on Steam Deck, you play mostly on Steam Deck or no?
For a game like this, I play it on my PC. It's sort of like mouse and keyboard is better than a controller for various reasons, and I want it. I split my Steam play between PC and a Steam Deck hooked up to a TV, sort of depending on the style of game and how much I want it to look awesome, which is, do I want it right, on my gaming PC can do a 4K on a small monitor, whereas a Steam Deck is limited to 1080, I think, even though it's on a big screen. And mouse and keyboard versus controller makes a difference. So yeah, I have both of them sort of nearby, and depending on how relaxed and on a big screen I want to be versus something looking good and needing high precision input from a mouse.
Yeah, my gaming PC is sitting behind me, and I just need to fix it. I think I just need to like put a new hard drive in and reinstall Windows. Maybe I should get around to doing that so I can actually play the games that are in my Steam library. Scott, are you a fan of factory games, or is this a skip for you?
It's not my favorite genre. There's games that when I play them, they feel suspiciously like jobs to me. The first time I remember feeling this experience was I think playing Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is a weird feeling to have during that. Like, I've never been a bomb diffuser person, but the idea of like, okay, we're under pressure, we have to communicate, get these complicated things. It's very stressful. Like, I was like, I played that with some coworkers. I was like, man, like I don't want to do this. Like, my job is already stressful enough. I don't want to come home and have more stress. And I think there's been a few, like the first Zachtronics, or one of the early Zachtronics games, Space Chem. I definitely went through an early love affair with until I realized, like, yeah, this feels a lot like a grind to me. But that said, like, there's a few that are coming out soon that are on the horizon that are like simplifications or tweaks on the formula that I think are very intriguing to me, because there is a lot to like there. That's sad, like that idea of like base building in an RTS. Like, I do really enjoy that. And so it is a genre I want to find the one for me, even if I never have.
So Scott and I are both programmers, and I found that factory games and programmers invoke either like one of two feelings. A, this is the like awesome part of programming and why I've like dedicated my career to this, or B, this feels exactly like work and why am I spending my free time doing this? And I feel like, Scott, you get a lot more of that second feeling, and I get a lot more of that first feeling out of these types of games.
Yeah, I love that different video games can engage for different people. Like my fiance has put more than 500 hours into Stardew Valley, which is, I think, like you could think of it from a similar perspective of like, it's basically just you have a bunch of tasks that you have to complete. And when you complete the task, you have another task you have to complete and you just keep going. And for her, it scratches an itch where if, like historically, we've been together coming up on 3 years now. Historically, she would what I call putzing. She putzes around and like cleans up the house and like reorganizes or does something with plants. And when I got her unintentionally totally hooked on Stardew Valley, I think it scratches that itch for her of like her brain wants to do something and complete a task and get that dopamine reward. And it scratches that itch for her. But I totally get it. I feel similarly as you do, Scott, to like scary movies. I like suspense, but I don't like the feeling of being scared. I don't understand why people like that feeling. Like I don't want to feel that like panic in my chest. So I think, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Let's see. And our last category here, which I think is a special one for the three of us, is the best video game deal you've ever scored. Scott, I want to start with you mostly because you're the only one that actually answered this question in our show notes doc that we're sharing. But I'm also very curious why this game for this price is your best deal ever scored. Do you want to dive into it?
Yes, it was February 16th, 2016, I think, 2017. A few months before Endless Space 2 by Amplitude Studios came out. And this was a game I was going to buy at launch. I never do pre-orders on principle, but unless there was just some shocking development, I knew I was going to buy this day one that comes out so I could play it. And then I got a notification that instead of being its normal $49.99 or whatever the deluxe edition was retailing at, because of a pricing error that I think they actually later explained, it was available very briefly for a couple of hours that day. For $9.37. I still have the receipt in my inbox because I remember this day. I was at work and I was like, I gotta go. I left my desk. I found a space where I could sit down and be like, even before like I had friends who were into this game, even before I told anybody about it, I was like, I just have to snag this because this price is not going to last. This is clearly a mistake. Yeah. And yeah, they in order to drive up sales interest in Endless Space 2, they had a franchise sale and they discounted the original Endless Space by 75%, and they accidentally discounted the upcoming release of Endless Space 2 by 75% as well.
Oops.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love little price errors like that for a quick second, you maybe can score a great deal. Michael, was yours also a price error?
No, I've probably had better deals than this, but this is the first one that comes to mind. And you talking about Cyberpunk earlier reminded me of it. That after Cyberpunk 2077 came out and was like a dud on launch, Amazon like liquidated all of their copies really quickly.
That's right.
So I picked up a like steelbook physical copy of Cyberpunk 2077 for, I think it was $9.99. Plus I had like a 20% off coupon going on. So I got a steelbook of this game for $8. And it was something about the timing of like, it was the day the studio announced that they were like going all in on patching and fixing and expanding and making it awesome was when this hit. So it was like, okay, I know I can buy this at this great price and then sit on it for a year to get the real experience. So got a great deal on this. Haven't played it yet.
Haven't played it yet, but maybe will. Yeah, and it's supposed to be really good now. Like, I mean, I played it probably a year ago, before my PC died, and definitely like it's amazing. And obviously all the bugs and garbage like that are totally fixed. But yeah, I would love to pick up the Steelbook for $10. That's awesome. Mine, I just put LOL as my answer because I don't know. I thought maybe both of you would roll your eyes, but mine is actually Xenoblade related, and I've been like wanting to talk about Xenoblade, white knuckling like this entire conversation we've been having. No, but when Xenoblade 2 came out, there's a special edition that was retailing for $100, and there was a price error at Target where they listed it for the $59.99 that the normal edition is, and I think it was up for an hour, or it wasn't very long, but I scored it for $60, and I think like both of you, maybe have gotten better deals or something, or like more % off in the past. But for me, picking this game up for $60, and this was back when I didn't really appreciate the game or the series. I hadn't played them, but I picked it up for $60. It is now worth $250. They were like super limited and hard to get. So I'm very happy picking up a price error. And typically, like in the past, like if you get an Amazon price error, they will honor it. But I think like places like GameStop or some other retailers, like they say, sorry, that was a price error. Here's your refund. Pay full price. And I was sort of expecting that to happen with Target, and it didn't. And they fulfilled them. And I know a bunch of people that, online that scored that deal as well, and got their copies for $60, and I was pumped. So that's my probably best video game deal I've ever scored. I think I've got some others, some other price errors that were maybe better, but they're not so video game related.
Yeah, I guess this was like most memorable video game deal you scored.
Yeah, especially now that like I've spent, last year was my Xenoblade era. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, it was my Xenoblade era.
Are you out of your Xenoblade era? Because boy, it feels like we're squarely in it.
almost there. I'm halfway through Xenoblade 3. Unfortunately, I think by the time this episode, everybody's listening to this, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition will release in a few days. If all goes well, publishing this. So I'll be back in the Xenoblade era, for another 100+ hours. So
that sounds completely indistinguishable from what I see right now.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a whole lot different, though. I have been a little bit distracted by Avowed, and a couple other games, but I'll be diving right back into it. We've talked about a bunch of good games, which is great. Let's see. So far, we talked about Deus Ex, Outer Wilds, Slay the Spire, Avowed, Satisfactory, Very Very Valet, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, more Cyberpunk, Endless Space 2 Deluxe. Any other games you guys want to mention before we wrap things up? Anything else we missed? Any low hanging fruit? No. Nothing. What about, what was it? What did we play? Streets of Rogue. Can we talk about Streets of Rogue? We played through it. I feel like the first time we played through it, we beat it. And you guys were both kind of stunned that we beat it on our first playthrough. Was it our first playthrough?
I think it was our first session. I think it might have been like game 2 or game 3. Once we kind of came to grasp with the controls. But yeah, it was like the first time we played it together.
Yeah. It's an awesome roguelike pixel game where you can die very easily and make mistakes very easily. But I think we had a ton of fun playing co-op.
Yeah, so Scott and I have each played a bunch of this game single player, and then we've also done a little bit of multiplayer together. And in some ways, this game, it's a roguelike. It in some ways feels more like Deus Ex than any other game I've played since, and that it's very open-ended on how you can solve, any problem thrown at you of do you want to hack into a computer to open the doors? Do you want to get a lockpick to open the doors? Do you want to launch a rocket launcher at the door to open the door? Do you want to make some noise and trick the guard in the house to come out and leave the door open as he does it? You're constantly faced with all these little problems throughout the game that there's a million different ways you can solve. And that is just catnip to me as well of open-ended puzzle solving, or problem solving. I do think the multiplayer mode is kind of funny in that it's like a little too easy, especially if you have one or two experienced people on. It was very much tuned as a single player game. And, we were able to jam through it as the three of us pretty quickly. But this also gets a very high mark from me.
I haven't played single player like you guys have, but the co-op was chaotic. I think it was easier, clearly, but it was also like way more chaotic, especially as someone that had never played it before. And I think we first played this couch co-op together, and I had maybe not couch co-op. Now that I'm remembering, I had no idea what I was doing. And when you go into it having no idea what you're doing, it's extra chaotic. But it was a lot of fun. And I think Streets of Rogue 2 is coming out this year, probably.
It has a demo. Yeah, they pushed the release date back a few times, so I think this latest one will stick. But also, it's been pushed enough that I stopped tracking it quite as close. It used to be an event on my calendar, and it no longer is. But yes.
Do you still have an event on your calendar for Slay the Spire 2? Is that in early access yet?
I don't know if they've set a firm date for it. If they have, then it needs to be on my personal calendar.
Looks like just 2025 still.
Yeah.
You going to buy that one at full price?
Yes. That is one that I need to be playing day one.
Yeah. I would love to have more conversations where people can learn about Scott and his purchasing habits and, like refusing to spend more than $10 on certain games. But I just love that there's like certain games you will spend full price on. But yeah, I need to check out your collection on Deku Deals and see like how much you spent on. I would love to see how much you spent on your games, but maybe for another time. Awesome. Well, do you guys want to wrap things up? Do you want to plug your social handles or where people can find you?
Yeah, I'm going to plug DekuDeals.com.
And that's it. DekuDeals.com. Hey, I'm fine with that. Totally. DekuDeals.com. You can also find our Deku Deals social account, DekuDeals.com on Blue Sky. We post some cool games there that you might discover some more games other than the ones we talked about today.
Yeah. I think it's the main place to check out. I am on Blue Sky. You can find me at scottparker.bsky.whatever. I forget. I've never actually said a Blue Sky handle out loud, but
just
search Scott Parker. You'll find me. Unless you find like the football player from England.
I'm M12Y on Blue Sky,
which I've always been so jealous. Like that, the M12Y. It's great. It's great. It's solid alias. And I'm Andrew Alerts on Blue Sky. I've been really loving Blue Sky lately. I think it's been it gives me very much early Twitter days vibes, where just everybody's chilling, talking about cool stuff. Shout out to John Walker who runs Buried Treasure. I love Buried Treasure. So check out Buried Treasure. That's none of us are involved with Buried Treasure, but I want to give that a shout out before we wrap things up. Sign up for an account on Deku Deals, add games to your wish list, to your collection, get alerts when things go on sale. I appreciate everybody listening. This is it's a fun episode. I think we'll probably get together again. I'd love to talk about some like video game music specifically, or maybe just factory games, dive into factory games with Michael or something. But appreciate you guys joining me, and look forward to more episodes of Talk a Good Game.
Andrew, it's been a treat. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together.
All right. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk a Good Game. This show is produced by me, Andrew Wolf, in Seattle, Washington, with music by Plus Minus One and art by Sonny Ross. Find more good games, create a wish list, and build your video game collection on DekuDeals.com. Deku Deals Patreon supporters experience the site and mobile app ad-free. Join now at patreon.com/DekuDeals. The best way to support TAG is by leaving a review, and you can suggest a game to be featured on a future episode by sending an email to tagg@DekuDeals.com.